Executive Director of Equity Legal Services. Let me welcome Nicole Nelson to the Karen Hunter Show. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for coming. Is Kalila coming in?
She's here.
I'm
Okay.
here, Karen.
Hi, Kalila. How are you? Let me welcome Kalila Jackson as well, co-counsel with Nicole. And we're going to talk about the Centerville, Illinois sewage crisis. And, you know, I'm juxtaposing it to now, right? This is something that went on in the 1800s and is still happening today. Talk a little bit, give us some of the history and why it's important.
Sure. So as you may or may not know, Centerville is a majority Black community, right? It's 95, almost 98% African American. Most of the residents are on very limited incomes. They're older, 60 to 80 years old, right? The ones we work with. For our purposes, right, this has been going on for 40 to 50 years. So 40 decades, right? Go ahead.
So Nicole, before you finish,
Right.
I think it was last week we were talking about, you know, this town and like literally there's sewage on their lawns. It's like, you know, the sewage is like, it smells, it's there. And my question was, why not move? You know, and I'm like, how did we live like this in a place where you can't drink your water, you can't bathe, and like, it's ridiculous. And then you were like, wait a minute, there's more to this.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, you are going too far. And this is important, you know, like it's
Yeah.
easy. We all have judgments. And I think as Black people, white folk constantly judging, why can't y'all do this? Why can't, you know, it's like there's always a backstory. So I'm smart enough to sit back and let's get a history. How did we get here?
Right. So we get that question a lot, like, why don't you just move, right? Well, like I just said, their ages, right? So they're 60s, older, and older. Most don't have mortgages. They're homeowners. They've paid off their mortgage, so they don't have mortgages. And also, like, they want to live there, right? Like they've lived here for decades. Their family members lived here. They like where they live. They just want these issues fixed. And also, where are they going to pick up and move? Who's going to buy the homes, right? Like the values have plummeted, right? It's cyclical, so they can't sell the homes. It has no value, that they're not going to get the value out of it, right? No one's going to buy it. They can't get any loans to get repairs on the home, right? Because of there's no equity in it because of the value. So there's all these other reasons. Even if they wanted to move, there are a few who do, very few. But even those who want to, they can't move. They're stuck there, right? But the majority, by and large, like 98% of those we work with, do not want to move. They don't have a mortgage. They can't afford another mortgage. They want to live there.
We have residents who, like you, just out of frustration said, okay, I'm gonna move. And one of the residents that I'm thinking about, it's one of the saddest stories. This man his interior of his home is absolutely gorgeous. He spent years building up his home, years investing in it. And after almost a decade of just living in the raw sewage, he was fed up and bought a home in a wealthier, whiter area outside of Centerville. But you know what he said to us? He told me, now I'm going to die working on my feet because I'll never be able to pay off this mortgage. And I had hoped to retire, and now I'll die working.
Yeah.
Let's go all the way back. You know, because these things don't just happen overnight. You don't wake up one day and have raw sewage in your front lawn. You know, take us through the paces, because I think that there's instruction here, because if it happened in Centerville and it's happened in Flint and it's happening in Mississippi, it can happen anywhere. And it's ironic, not really, that it's happening in majority Black neighborhoods.
It's not that it can happen anywhere. It is happening everywhere in Black communities. This is a classic case of environmental racism. And I'm from 20 minutes across the river in St. Louis. So we know Centerville and Granite City and East St. Louis. This is where the shit happens. It happens exclusively in Black communities. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sister Karen. I interrupted you.
No. I want Nicole and Kalila to give us the history. How did this happen?
I think we should be like, and we always really try to clarify here, right? Like even with the lawsuit that we filed, we wanted to be careful and thoughtful, because this is an all Black town, and we certainly don't want to, you know, do anything that would be harmful to this town. However, we should be very clear, Centerville is not only an all Black town predominantly, but its leadership is predominantly Black, all Black, and has been for decades, right? So while St. Clair County and the leadership there is predominantly white, and certainly we feel bears some responsibility, the leadership for Centerville certainly bears a tremendous responsibility, as evidenced in the lawsuit that we filed, right? So you have, we have residents who have told us, look, things were great when the white people were over us. I'm just gonna say when they were mayors, right? Our systems were taken care of. I know, and it's hard to hear, right? When our system, our infrastructure was great, we didn't have but then we had Black mayors, and then they weren't taking care of the infrastructure. They were, and there's been history of issues with the money and the finances, right? That's been a problem. Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna challenge that, Sister Nicole, not challenge what you're saying, but challenge that positioning of this issue. Because the reality is that, and this is again, Centerville and everywhere else where we see these issues, the reality is that when we had white leadership made infrastructure and trash and sewage decisions such that the Black side of town, in this case, North Centerville, but all across the country, the Black side of town catches the brunt of where the undesirable water ends up, where the undesirable infrastructure decisions are made. So when you had white leadership, that's what set the stage for where we are now, and Black leadership inherits the disaster.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I don't think that takes away accountability for what the Black leadership has currently decided to do over the last 40 to 50 years, right? So there's no disagreement here, right? That both sides bear responsibility in the fact that there are whiter sides of St. Clair County, that's where this is, right? Where they don't have these issues. Like we've always said, I live in St. Clair County, I live on the whiter side. We don't have these issues, and there's a reason, right? Because we live on the whiter side, and they're not going to allow that to happen, right? And there's some responsibility here where it's built in a way where it's wrecking the Black side of the community, right? However, it can't be ignored that for 40 to 50 years, the infrastructure has gotten to a place where it has been ignored and neglected to a point where there's been hardly any maintenance, a system that is almost defunct and inoperable, right? Like you're talking about looking at records where they're not hardly doing anything to it, barely keeping it sustainable. And then when they do get money, they're putting it on the opposite sides of town, these commercial sides of town, and not putting it on the sides of town where you know that you have residents suffering in these conditions. And they're not living in these conditions, these officials, right?
There's no doubt, but where do we get infrastructure maintenance money from? From the residential tax. And we all see even the wealthiest of Black neighborhoods have not appreciated to the same extent. And therefore,
Don, sorry, but that's the
let's do it. Let's do it.
Same excuses they give. Oh, well, you know what? Our residents are elderly, and so they're exempt from these taxes, and so we can't.
No. I'm not saying they're exempt from taxes. I'm saying Black homes and Black neighborhoods don't appreciate.
There's grants that they can apply for, and they're not. I mean, why are we as the legal?
Oh my goodness! You talking about Big Mom and them need to apply? Need to know how to apply.
No, I'm talking about the leadership. This is on the leadership. This falls on the city leadership. You don't have any responsibility of being in these positions if you don't know what to do. Why are we as litigation counsel coming in and actually having to find these resolutions, find engineers, which is what we are doing, finding engineers and everyone else in grants to supplant and fix these problems? That's not our job. But we're literally doing what their job has been for the last 40 to 50 years.
Hold on. We're talking with Nicole Nelson and Kalila Jackson, who are on the Equity Legal Services. And you can go to floodedandforgotten.com or equitylegalservices.org to check out what they're doing. Who hired you? Kalila?
Oh, no, the community brought us here, and we are hired, use that in the loosest sense of the word, because we are not paid to do this work. We are doing this work for the community pro bono. And so the residents.
So when did the call come in, and what was the call? So like, take us. I want you to walk us through it. So the call came in, and what was said?
We have shit in our yard. We're paying these bills. We flush our toilets, and the shit comes up in our yard, Karen. And this isn't fair, and it's not right, and no one's listening.
Yeah. So it's by happenstance, right? So I worked somewhere else, and Walter Bird, who, if you looked at any of the articles, Walter Bird is all in the articles. And I met him at a completely different place, completely unrelated reason. And in those conversations, jokingly, because he's very personable, says, I shouldn't even have to pay this waste treatment bill because the waste doesn't even make it to the facility. I flush my toilet and it comes up in my yard. And I was like, no, that doesn't sound right. He was like, come look. So I did. And it was by his front step, right? And so we worked together. And then I left that place, started Equity Legal Services. Walter came with me as a client. And that's how it started. Other neighbors started calling Walter. Walter referred them to me. And then Khalil and I knew each other from doing work and protest work in St. Louis. And so then Khalil and I just kind of immediately just started working together. And it just kind of started organically.
And so that's why when we say the resident gets the credit, they built this from the ground up. They built the resistance, and we're a tool that we assist them in this work, in this fight.
So who are you filing, or who have you filed the suit against? Who are you holding responsible? And then what's the recourse? Like what do you see happening? How are we getting this fixed?
So we have named the leaders, and the suit is pending in the Southern District of Illinois. At this time, this is an initial lawsuit filed on behalf of 2 long-term residents of the community. And initially, the suit was filed against the sewage department, which is the Commons of Sokovia, and the leadership of the township, and the leadership of the city of Centerville, which overlap. And so initially the lawsuit only sought injunctive relief. All they wanted, their only ask, was to stop the flooding, to stop the sewage. The court came back and suggested that we needed to ask for monetary damages. So the complaint was amended recently to do that.
Okay. All right. Where are we in the process? Because for me, I don't really care. I mean, I care whose fault it is. I just need people not to flush their toilet and have the crap show up in their front yard. I need 60 and 80-year-old people who have been working and paid off their homes to get some of that dignity back. I mean, I know what it feels like to pay off a home. My father, when he did it, like there's an immense amount of pride in paying off your home, and you work that hard. You want to live out your later days, not having to contend with crap in your front yard. I need that to stop immediately. Right. So how long will this go on before, these residents don't have to flush their toilet and see crap show up in their front yard? What's the time frame?
So, we approach it from a lot of angles, right? Like litigation isn't the only solution, and it can't be, right? So the residents have a resident committee. We use that as a mobilization tool. And with that, we lean on the IEPA, which is the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the governor's office. We have calls with them behind the scenes. We really push behind the scenes for funding to get this kind of solved immediately. We're on the ground pretty regularly. Like I'm just right up the road from Centerville. I'm there almost daily. So there's issues on the ground pretty regularly, and we're pushing that to them. Like Khalil and I always say, right, I don't think people realize how much work goes into it behind the scenes. Just litigation ends up being like 20% of our workload, right? We're doing a lot of things behind the scenes to push all these government agencies and officials to get them to fix it, like you said, immediately. Because they are older and they've been dealing with this really their entire adulthood, and as have their children. So we just do a lot of, we have a lot of calls, and we just had a virtual town hall last week, having all these officials on, including Senator Duckworth, and just trying to push them. That's a lot of what we do, and instead of, in lieu, and in addition to litigation.
So, and again, we're talking about Centerville, Illinois. The sewage, the raw sewage, is throughout. Like, so it's not just dropped, in their yard. They can't bathe, cook, use the water out of their faucet. Things we take for granted, right? Is that what they're experiencing, and is it across the board?
It depends. So they still use the water for bathing. Mm-hmm. For cooking, it depends. So we have a bottled water distribution through the Urban League here that we started, what was that, almost 2 years ago?
About 2 years ago at this point.
the residents, so we learned that they don't drink the water. So we learned that some of them had been drinking it for over a decade. And so they asked for bottled water. And so we coordinated with the Urban League. And so that's supported through donations. And so most do not drink the water, and most that we know don't cook with it. They use the bottled water for that. Yeah, but most they do bathe with it as long as they don't get it in their mouth or anything. That's what has been suggested.
Wow, I'm sitting here stunned for a lot of reasons. You know, the amount of bad conditions many of us endure, and I'm thinking about Flint as we're talking as well, because their waterways still aren't fixed. The water has not been fixed there, and people have we have made do. You know, basically folks have figured out how to make do for the last 10, 20, 30 years in Centerville, the last 10 years almost in Flint. And I'm like, why? I'm like, no, one day is too long to flush your toilet and have crap show up in your yard. So the mayor, the city council, do they live in Centerville? Are they living under these conditions?
Yeah, and that's my only point to you, Don, was that like I think to me what makes this a little bit worse is like our own people doing it to each other, right? Like and the level of indifference that the leaders have had, right, and continue to have, and continue to be unwilling to even show up to have conversations with the residents and be accountable to them, right? They've been invited to several of their resident meetings, and just even before this space was created for them to have meetings, the residents will go to the city council meetings. They wouldn't answer them. Sometimes they would cancel them so that if they knew they were coming, right? And so this is years of frustration built up for the residents.
I don't want to push back. And I know Don wants to get in. And I think, you know, what he's saying, and it rings true to me, is that they may be handcuffed in a way that their white counterparts were never. And who's going to admit that, or who wants to, you know, it's like I always tell people when someone promises to do something and they don't do it, it's not because they're evil or bad people, it's that maybe they really can't do it and they don't want to admit that they can't do it. So they rather avoid you than to have to confront their, you know, inability to get things done.
Is that possible? I understand that, Karen, but
I don't think
in this situation, indifference is really the key word. I'll give you an example. We literally have this lawsuit. This lawsuit has been pending since June. The lawsuit, I don't know if you've seen it. It's in excruciating detail, lays out the problems in this community for the past 40 to 50 years. The Guardian ran an article about 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. The mayor of the city said, "I'm not aware of the problem." He's named in the lawsuit.
He's been the mayor for 12 years.
He's been the mayor for 12 years. So this is more than mere, we understand the struggles that communities of color inherit and inhabit and have to work through and live through and fight through. This isn't a situation where they've been in the trenches fighting with the community. And it's not to say that their predecessors haven't, because we have documents that show some of their predecessors did try and still hit those walls. So we understand, but at least for the last 12 years, it's pure indifference. And that's also unacceptable and inexcusable.
And just also just want to be very clear that Khalila and I were very, very mindful of filing this lawsuit against, including a predominantly Black community, like the mayor that it led by Black leadership, like as two Black attorneys, right?
Absolutely.
Very mindful of dynamics, and then very strategic about all that comes with that. I'm not going to say anything else, but there are a lot of reasons and things behind the scenes that went into what we did.
Look, I don't want to come off as though I'm criticizing you all. I'm not.
Oh no, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like you're criticizing me.
No, I think that
I also wouldn't care.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Well, listen, first of all, Centerville and Black America owes the two of y'all a debt of gratitude, because this is not sexy work, and Lord knows public interest work doesn't pay. And you all have done this on your own, just out of a feeling of the necessity of saving this community. So thank you on behalf of everybody who's affected, but really all of us. You all are doing the Lord's work. Gosh, I'm a history guy, so I'm thinking about historical inequality. It always finds itself in the environmental racism context. I think we can agree that this is a classic case of environmental racism because the white areas of St. Clair County ain't dealing with this, right?
100%.
Absolutely.
I think we can also agree that the reality is that this is a failure of leadership.
Definitely.
Whether that leadership was black or white. Now, something I've recurrently discussed with Karen is that when you talk about who has the resources, so Karen, I think is right when you're talking about people who really don't have the resources or the ability to fix this and they just rather duck. That's not acceptable. But when you talk about leadership, who really has the resources and the ability to come in and fix stuff like this overnight is the federal government. So you're talking about failures of leadership. You got to look at Duckworth. You got to look at Durbin. You got to look at our Lord and Savior, Barack Obama, because all of them sat in the seats of federal leadership representing the state of Illinois. And they rather be caught up raising money in Chicago and kicking it with Oprah and them than worrying about and worried about gun violence in Chicago. And that's a real thing. They should be concerned with that. But you have real communities who don't get the headlines who have been forgotten because this didn't take place over the course of 5 or even 10 years. This is the result of years and years of failures of leadership and leaving certain communities behind because they didn't have the political power to raise their voices. So here's what I'll say to you. You just happen to come on the show with a dude who's licensed in Illinois and Missouri and talks to federal legislators every day. So if there's any way that I or my people up here in DC can be helpful, count us in.
Definitely.
For the pro bono. If I got to go wrangle Senator Durbin's LD chief of staff tomorrow, we will go do that. The House just passed a $1.9 trillion infrastructure package. I don't want to hear about no stimulus. I don't want to hear about no tax cuts. I want to hear about how many millions of dollars it will take to fix the infrastructure sewage problem in Centerville, because this is not something that can be solved with the revenue that Centerville brings in every year. It's simply not enough.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
So if it's about septic tanks, like our brother who called in a moment ago, or if it's about digging up yards and reseeding them and fixing this, we got to do it. Because those are my brothers. I'm from the Lou, right? And y'all might come to the Lou to kick it every now and then. Our brothers, right?
Hey now, she's from St. Louis.
Now I'm from the Lou now, so don't 314 all day. But but what I want, the other thing that we want to amplify, and you've said this, and Karen has said this. This is not just Centerville's story, and so I'd be remiss to your listeners. This is Centerville. This is Lowndes County. This is all over the United States.
Yes.
And what we need is absolutely this is a failure of leadership from top to bottom. But from the top, what we need is federal leadership. And people like Cory Booker and Senator Duckworth have started that work, but it's not near enough. We need more, and we need real investment and taking down these environmental racism issues across the United States.
Listen,
not
our
acceptable.
sister today, our brother, Michael, it matters to, elections matter, and in my view, electing Democrats matter because they appoint people who have jurisdiction over these issues. Our brother, Michael Regan, head of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Our sister today, Delta Sigma Theta's finest confirmed, Marsha Fudge, housing.
Yes, saw that. Yes.
These are the people who our family has immediate access to, and we have to bring it to bear for the use of our people.
We should definitely have
so here's what's gonna happen, because this is an action show. Don off mic. Y'all gonna connect next week. I want a praise report. I want to know what you got done between today and next week in terms of connect. Yeah, because we don't talk about it. We do it. Y'all have been rolling up your sleeves to get this done. Let's get something done. Damn it. No one should have crap in their front yard. Not 2021. Not 30 years ago, and especially now our elders that have worked so hard to actually pay off their homes. Let's also check back in on the property values. Let's also check back in. Let's let this be a model for what we can get done. Just a few of us, we don't need everybody. So let me just again applaud and thank you guys for picking up your baton and working to make this happen. And Don, yes, I didn't know the ancestors are at play here. God is in the building right now. I had no idea I could make some things like this happen. but he's gonna make it happen. So Nicole Nelson,
I'm gonna help.
Yes, I said it. No, too late. We're gonna speak it out.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Don. We'll sign you up.
Yeah, no, hold on.
Pleadings.
Kalila Jackson, Nicole Nelson, and folks, y'all can check them out at equitylegalservices.org. Check them out. We already tweeted it.